Welcome back to the Wolverine.com former player, Michigan hockey player roundtable. I am Michael Spath here with Noah Ruden and Dave Huntzicker. And guys, a lot to discuss this week. Michigan, in the ideal scenario, takes on Boston College at Yost Ice Arena, a higher-ranked Boston College team. Upsets them, if you can call it an upset. I don't know if you guys have ever felt like you upset a team in your career, but that was, on paper, Michigan was ranked 10th and Boston College was 4th, and they beat them 3-1, looked great doing it. Then came out on Saturday, their first road game. As we talked about a little beforehand, it was a 4-4 game, but they finished RIT off and won 7-4. So a lot of good things this weekend. How much will that help a team that is so young to have this kind of start?
Well, it's always good to start with winning taste in your mouth as a young player. You want to get that feeling of success right away because winning is contagious and so is losing. And I think if you start a season off in the wrong way with a young team, it could go the wrong way for a while. So it's obviously really important. That win against BC is going to give the team a lot of confidence. And they won at RIT, but it wasn't in sterling fashion. They got outshot pretty significantly. And they had a 4-0 lead that they blew. So I think what's good about that is they won, but I think they'll take some lessons from that road win that when you're on the road in college hockey, no matter who you're playing, if you don't keep that gas pedal down, the opposing team's gonna come back at home. And RIT showed that they can do that. So now moving forward, when Michigan goes to UNH this upcoming weekend, hopefully they can take that lesson with them to a more hostile environment and a better opponent.
Agreed. I mean, two games doesn't make a season, correct? And so it's just sort of a small sample, but you're happy that they have that first step, the confidence, because that's so important for young kids to have. And then, like we've seen a couple of times the last few years, they've gotten off to really poor starts, and then they've been playing catch-up all year, and then hopefully this is just sort of a glimpse of what we're going to see this year, where we can be successful from start to finish. And I know that coach says that in every game he wants you to play 60 minutes. It doesn't really matter what the score is, he'll tell you when it's over. Well, I think the same holds true for a season. You got to play the full season hard, do your best, and he'll tell you when it's over how we did.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I wanted to ask you, 1998, your freshman year, you came in with double-digit rookie class. I went back and looked, and in the 4 instances where Michigan has had double-digit freshmen, they've gone to 3 Frozen Fours. And there seems to be, it seems to be that people think that having youth is a handicap, but it's almost like the opposite has worked in Michigan's favor these last couple of times. And when the game I saw on Friday, or on Thursday versus Boston College, I saw a lot of enthusiasm. I remarked when the Michigan beat Boston College, they came off that bench like they just won the Stanley Cup with so much energy, so much excitement. And how does are we thinking about this wrong? Is it maybe a good thing to have a double-digit freshman class?
It has its positives and negatives. There is something to be said about having some guys that have been there a number of years and they know how to weather storms and they have that confidence level already. But I think what you saw is you're right, excitement. You also saw a very good work ethic. I was very impressed with the younger kids, how hard they played on Thursday night specifically, and they need to carry that through the whole season. I remember my freshman year, and again with such a big class, we felt like such a almost like a duty to try and live up to the standards that had been set the years prior, and that we were just playing as hard as we possibly could, and we didn't know anything different. And we didn't ever sort of get that complacency that sometimes can happen when you come to a place like Michigan. You could have some complacency and just not try quite as hard if you've had some success. But those kids haven't felt the success yet at Michigan, and so they'll work really hard, I think, all this year. The next thing is, for the coaches and the leadership group in the locker room to make sure that in subsequent years they keep that going.
But on that note as well, freshmen, and you're saying the energy and everything, what's also something you notice about this team specifically is, last year wasn't a strong year for this program. It's the first year we haven't made the NCAA tournament in 23 seasons. You have 10 freshmen now who don't have that memory. They don't have that, as a part of them. And so they're coming in completely fresh. And they definitely don't want to keep that trend going, but they don't, they don't have that memory. So I think you might see them react almost even differently because they're not coming in with any type of pedigree except for Michigan hockey, and let's win. Not last season, which obviously everyone wants to shake off. And you can see those last 10 games when they started shaking off, they're starting to carry that over to the start of this year as well.
Well, I think the thing too, looking at those 4 seasons, and there were the '98 class, 2002, 2006, and 2008, is that with the exception of 2018, that had Kevin Porter and Chad Cleric leading it, every one of those teams kind of went through some ups and downs and had some bumps along the way. And the key is going to be that senior leadership, is those older guys, how they make sure if there is a losing streak during the season, if it's 2 games, 4 games, 5 games, I mean, there's not haven't been that many 5-game losing streaks in Michigan hockey history underneath red. But when that happens, how do those older guys kind of bring those younger players along through it?
Well, one of the classes you're referring to is 2006, and that was my senior year. And myself, Brandon Kalanick, and Andrew Ebbett were the only 3 seniors. We had a very young team, and we had those ups and downs as well. There are times in the season where we weren't sure, and it is difficult to reel in a bunch of young players and try to guide them. And I think what's important is, especially as a senior class, is those leaders need to know, and Kale mentioned this a couple sessions ago, they need to lead with their personality that fits. Don't everyone try to be, the tough guy. Don't everyone try to be the nice guy. Find out where you fit as a leader, and find out which freshmen and which people you can reach out to the best, and collectively as a senior class work with those younger kids to fight through those ups and downs, and not make sure that the young players don't get too low if you hit a bad streak, and don't get too high if you win one big game like against BC or anything like that, and try your best to show them that, like Dave just said, it's a long season, and carry them along that way.
Well, you guys saw the game on Thursday, and I want to ask you if there was a freshman that stood out to you. The one that stood out to me, and I was surprised by, is Alex Kyle played on the top line with Andrew Kopp and Derek DeBlois. And we've heard a lot about some of the other freshmen, the guys that were in the USA program, the 2 defensemen that were really highly regarded. I hadn't heard a lot about Alex Kyle. Here's a kid that played in the USHL. Is a little bit of an older player for a freshman, but I thought he played gritty. I thought he played with, and that's a hockey term that people love to use when you say that guy played with an edge to his game. And he was out there throwing his body around, creating room for Kopp and DeBlois, had a couple good scoring chances. And I don't think I was surprised, but when on Saturday night against RIT, Alex Guppel came back in the lineup, which we'll talk about in a moment, but they didn't take Kyle off that top line. They kept him there. And I thought that was obviously a confidence booster, a red saying that, hey, here's a kid that played a good game, and I liked what I saw. Was there someone among the freshmen that stood out to you guys on Thursday in the Boston College game?
I think I tend to focus on the defense, and frankly...
Shocking as a defenseman.
Yeah, and that's all I know, obviously. So, but I thought the freshmen did very well and presented each in their own unique way. I'm going to blank on the name, but the very tall kid,
Kevin Lohan.
He actually reminds me a lot of me when I played. He looks just a little bit. He just looks a little bit different out there, but he seemed to be in good position a lot, and he's got a very long reach, and he could really be a shutdown defenseman now. He has to take steps forward. He has to get stronger. He has to play more physical. But in the same token, I think all the freshmen did a great job, and I'm not sure I can point out to too many specifically that said that was better than all of them. They brought each something different to the team that helped them.
And I think that's a great point, is the freshmen coming in and you're asking us to pick out the best one. Well, that's great that's the issue we have, because a lot of times, especially early in the season, you're going to say which freshman really messed up, or which one stood out as not fitting into this lineup or couldn't keep up with a very fast BC team. You didn't see that. There wasn't one player out there, one freshman specifically, that you thought, okay, we need to work with him a little bit, or maybe he should sit out. This is a bit too much for him. So I think, big picture, that's a good problem to have.
Well, and I thought, the one freshman that we did hear a lot about that was a top draft pick was JT Comfort, and at least for one game, I thought he did live up to his billing. Very strong in the puck, and you guys know this as hockey players, there are, everybody looks at the stats and say, well, did he have a goal, did he have an assist, but there were 3 or 4 times where I saw him back-checking, picking up a man that was otherwise unoccupied, lifting the stick, which lifting the stick is one of those things that coaches talk about. Maybe you guys could explain it to the common fan that doesn't understand how important it is to lift a guy's stick as a defensive player.
Well, if you don't have the stick, the person's not checked it anyway. They have the ability to put the puck in the net, and so you may stand and be as close as Noah and I are right now, and you're not on him because he can still get a shot off and easily score a goal. So you have to really tie up that stick, and with the rules today, you have to be really close, or else you're going to get a hooking penalty. Yeah. And so it really is. It's a skill that is often overlooked. And I agree. You don't have to have points to be a good player. I can point out a number of players that I played with. Bobby Hayes, for example, was told to don't let this top line get a goal. And he went out and for 40 games a year, he kept the top line off the scoreboard. And then I saw that with a number of other guys over the last 10 years. So it's not goals and assists don't tell the whole story, because you can have guys that have lots of points and they're minus 15 on the year, right? And that tells you they're not contributing to the team as well.
Or at least even strength. And you mentioned maybe something that's overseen as players, but one guy who has a lot of goals and a lot of assists, but is probably more known for his stick work and stick checking, is Pavel Datsyuk. And the guy who, does put those numbers, but everyone, when you refer to Pavel Datsyuk, it's not just his magic with his hands with the puck, but when he doesn't have the puck, how much he picks people's pockets, how many defensive forward of the year awards has he won, and how well known is he for that. So I think there are those hockey people who do understand the quality of play that doesn't necessarily show up as statistics, but when the player's out there and you know how they're performing. So.
Well, wanted to ask you, I mentioned Guptill. He missed the first game. He was suspended for a incident that occurred during the summer, an off-ice issue is all Red wanted to say about it. There's expectations, he said, to be a student athlete in Michigan. The kid didn't do it. He was suspended for the first game. He came back for the second game, and he played on the fourth line.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you guys that a top line forward, a guy who led the team in goals with 16 each past seasons, started off on the fourth line?
Not at all. Coach is he's a coach, but he's also a mentor, and he's someone who has a strong set of morals, and you respect that, and he demands a lot from his players. And just because you had a couple good years, he's going to make you re-earn that. You got to earn that credit back, and you got to prove to yourself, especially after a big 3-1 win at home where everything was clicking. He's not going to disrupt that because of one player's coming back. He's going to say, here's where you're going to fit in the lineup now, and you can earn your spot back. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Do I think it'll change? Yes, Guptill's obviously a talented forward. He's, like you said, he's had 16 goals each of the past 2 seasons. He's a big kid at 6'3", and I think he will work his way back into it. But on the same token, coach isn't going to move him up the depth chart for Alex Guptill's sake. He's going to do what's best for the team and what lines are working best with each other.
Yeah, I totally agree as far as I think it's a message that nobody's bigger than the team and that there is an expectation here. Mm-hmm. And I think that he's our top scorer from last year, and yet he's on the fourth line in his first game back after sitting out a game. And it just sort of goes to show that a couple things, that one, the team is more important, but also there's competition to play this year. I mean, there is no expectation that just because you are a returning player or a freshman that you are going to have a spot on this roster every night. And so I think that's a message that I don't know if Red is trying to give this year, but it's a message that he's done almost every year when something's come up. Again, I'll go back to when I played. Marty Turco missed a couple classes, and he sat him out in maybe the biggest weekend of the year against Michigan State. And it may have cost us the regular season championship that year. And like Noah said, Red cares, but he doesn't care to the point where it's more important for the player to learn from that and start doing the right thing than it necessarily is to win a game.
And we talk about leadership with a young freshman class. What better leadership and example showing than from your coach to show all these young freshman players who have not been a part of this program yet right away to say, listen, I'm not messing around. You're here to be a part of this team and this organization, this program, this university, not for you and yourself. And if he has to set that tone early on, aside from the seniors, he's doing it.
Well, and that's good because you said it early, like you guys said, then you don't have that issue crop up in the second half of the year. I know in that 2008 team, Kevin Quick, we maybe mentioned this last week, was kicked off the team in January or February, if I remember correctly. You had a player removed, when you're playing, and if you're going to do that early in the year and set the ground rules. Like this is what the precedent is here. This is what the standard is here,
sure.
And we're not going to deal with any of this other crap.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, our kid we lost him later in the year because I do think that Red really wants to be that father figure and give these kids second chances, but they're not free second chances, and you're gonna pay some penalties for
and earn it back.
Yeah, the thing that I think is most impressive, if you ask Coach, who he's most proud of over the years, he's not going to list just the NHL guys. He's going to list the doctors, the lawyers, the attorneys. He's going to list the people that are successful both in hockey and outside of hockey. That's what Red's, I think, true legacy is here.
How come he hasn't named you then?
Well,
we mentioned doctors and lawyers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wanted to ask about the goalie play real quick. Steve Racine, here's a guy that we talked about the way that he finished. Would he be able to pick up where he left off? And I know someone can look at it and say, hey, he got 4 goals on Saturday RIT. He also made a career high 42 saves.
Exactly.
And in the game on Thursday night against Boston College, that first period, I thought Boston College won the period, yet Michigan was up 1-0. And it's because Steve Racine, a couple, odd man rushes, a breakaway. There was one puck that went off the post but that's just part of hockey.
As a goalie, they'll say we gave him the post.
Yeah, well, there you go. But I thought he looked fantastic.
No, I agree with you, and I think we talked about in the first session here that for goaltending, like place kicking and anything else, confidence is so tremendously important to your game, and he got that confidence not just for himself, but his team got that confidence in him, and it carried through the summer, like we said, and into these first couple games. And I agree with you, he looked very confident in himself. His positioning was sound. There wasn't a whole lot of extra movement in him. He was very comfortable with every play he was making. They didn't have a tremendous amount of chances. I thought our defense and our forwards did a good job back-checking and taking care of their speedy forwards. But when those breakdowns happened, he made the big saves, and he didn't give up many rebounds, and he looked strong and big. He didn't look nervous or out of place at all in a big game. And, I know like you said, he gave up 4 goals in RIT. That's the first road game. Michigan took 7 penalties in a row in that middle frame. Even though they came out with a victory, like you said, 46 shots against. I still feel like he held it together on the road for a team that needed it when they needed him to. So I look forward to seeing his progression as a goalie as well. Can he keep it going? Because one thing that having an up and down season can mess with your confidence, but if you win a lot in a row, you don't want to get too cocky either. You want to keep that work ethic going and keep progressing. So hopefully he can string a few wins together and keep improving himself.
Well, there were so many good things coming out of this first weekend for Michigan. Now they've risen to 5th in the country. Oh. I know that as former players, you guys probably don't care about that at all. I know that Red doesn't care about that at all. All that matters is you're ranked number 1 at the end of the year. But it's something that's a talking point for Michigan fans to get excited about. Certainly, we saw on Thursday night against a top 5 team, Yost Ice Arena wasn't full. I think they listed the crowd at 5,000. It can hold over 6,000. I know Tigers were playing in a Game 5 elimination that they ended up winning. I know in the press box we all went excited when Miguel Cabrera hit a 2-run homer. But I think it'll help the fans just a little bit, get excited about this team. And certainly that's not a bad thing.
No, it's never bad to be recognized. But like you said, Red, it's 2 games. It really is almost arbitrary right now, these rankings. BC was ranked higher, but they had 10 freshmen. No one really knew how good they were supposed to be either. So right now, the rankings are a feeling out process as well. I think a big test, again, will be this road trip coming up this weekend. It's UNH, who was picked to finish 3rd, but technically tied for 2nd in Hockey East. They only have a few freshmen in the lineup. They're an old team in terms of seniors and juniors, and be on the road for back-to-back games. I think you get through these first few weekends with a winning record, then you can be a little more comfortable with that ranking that we're getting. But I don't think anyone's looking at moving up in the rankings the first weekend.
Yeah, the rankings are for us, right? The fans and the media, and they don't really hold a lot of value to the players because all they care about is when the pairwise rankings come out and then you start determining or jockeying for position in the NCAA tournament. Those are the only rankings that ever matter. And really, it only matters to get into the tournament and then who wins it. Up until now, we've had 2 games which are important, but in the scheme of things, they mean nothing, the rankings that we have. And we just have to keep watching and building towards that pairwise, because that's the only rankings.
Yeah, I think especially at University of Michigan and college, people who follow collegiate sports, you look at football, where there's only 12, 13 games maybe in the season, so each game, from game 1 on, is extremely important because you only have so many chances, whereas in hockey, you're trying to attach that ranking to your team because that's how sports are. But there's 40 some odd games in the season. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's tournaments. You can, if you win the Big Ten championship, you get an automatic bid, like Michigan almost did last year, regardless of what your ranking is. There's other ways to win and get into the NCAA tournament and things like that. So those rankings are nice, like Dave said, for us, but it's arbitrary to the team.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Well, guys, Michigan goes on the road to play New Hampshire this week. We'll have a lot to talk about next week when they host BU and UMass Lowell. It should be a great weekend at Yost in 2 weeks from now, and it should be a great weekend for those guys when they travel out to Manchester this weekend. So thanks very much for joining us. This is the Wolverine.com.